Hey guys, let's pretend that today is the day. The day when you have saved just enough money to do another one of those lovely Shen hauls that you've been looking forward to for ages, yet you haven't had the money, therefore the minor inconveniences, they just all kind of pile up. But you go onto the homepage and there is just so much to choose from, which is a bloody good job considering that your plans for the upcoming weeks are going to be busy. You soon have another job interview. You plan to go out a few times, and you're not going to lie to yourself, at the back of your mind, you're also hoping that some guy who has been kind of eyeing you up a bit and you don't think he looks too bad either might finally pluck up the courage to ask you out. You take pride in your appearance, but you're no quiet person sitting in the corner willing to be pushed around either. Instead, you wish to be viewed as intelligent, confident, and just as assertive as any man would be. Yet you constantly still doubt yourself and your own abilities. You think that you are not as good looking as most of the girls in the clubs, therefore you always feel the need to put in that little bit more effort, yet you somewhat take pride in some of your better features. Yet however much effort you put in, at the back of the mind, there still lies the question of whether you will really be as competent as the white middle-aged man who effortlessly strides through the corridor, swiftly grabbing any opportunity that he can get his hands on. Yeah, lacking confidence is never much fun, and although we like to flaunt our bodies for whatever reasons, can it really be as good for women collectively as we like to make out? Hello, and welcome to another episode of Personally Political. In case you are new to this podcast, my name is Victoria and I make podcasts mainly relating to social issues, but also relating to political topics. I am 19 and currently studying at Swansea. I like going to pretty places, wasting money on things which I certainly don't need, and listening to the same old songs over and over again. The aim of my podcasts is to provide an interesting and hopefully educational insight into topics that are trending at the time, or just topics which I personally find interesting myself. And although I'll be mainly going into depth around these topics, I will sometimes also get personal, just because I'm in the habit of oversharing, and if I have another outlet by which I can potentially do so, then I may as well. Anyways, hope that you enjoy the rest of this podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Personally Political. Oh my god, I feel like I'm already repeating myself here. Great. I've sorted out the camera problem though. Well, I've not really sorted it out. The lighting's still not great. The wallpaper is still the same. It's still a new house. Well, yeah, okay, I'm not going to discuss me moving house. I'm sure none of you are that interested, and it's like, yeah, my personal stuff. Anyways, my camera is in a place where, like, my bloody hands won't be getting in the way. Oh my god, even that didn't sound right. Okay, I actually need to shut up and read the script. Okay, right. Today I am going to be addressing the question of whether dressing sexy is as empowering as we may like to think. I'll begin by discussing the reasons behind why women may choose to wear more revealing clothing and the benefits that this can yield, but then I'll talk about some of the more negative elements to this. This will include the way in which women's bodies are valued in the workplace, how we have become over-sexualised, and the history of beauty standards. Before we begin talking about how it is possible that women as a whole dressing slutty could just be counterproductive or even potentially harmful, let's talk about some of the reasons behind why women choose to wear revealing clothing in the first place, and some of the benefits that this could yield. For a start, one of the main reasons behind why women may choose to wear more revealing clothing is because it enables them to fit in more. For instance, a large number of women may not consider turning up to the club wearing a loose t-shirt and a pair of jogging bottoms, simply because it is not a thing to do. And also, as I would imagine that you'd be melting your tits off. Alternatively, it is more likely that women would choose to wear a crop top, a tight-fitted dress, or a shorter skirt, while spending quite a bit of time on their makeup, simply because that is what all their friends are doing, and because it is the in thing to do. However, another reason behind why women may choose to wear this kind of clothing in clubs is because it makes them feel good about themselves. After all, if you're a woman listening to this, then there's a good chance that after spending half an hour fixing your makeup and after putting on a brand new dress, you have felt pretty good about how you look, and your friends have probably done the same. Therefore, I'm sure that quite a few compliments end up getting tossed around. Yes, it can be empowering, and there are studies to back this up. For instance, women who dressed for a hot date felt more assertive, flirtatious, and sexually open, and overall experienced more positive emotions. This suggests that where women choose to wear more revealing clothing, they are not doing so necessarily to impress men, but rather because it makes them feel better about themselves. This can be backed up by my own experience, because I will happily admit that if I put in a little more effort into my appearance and choose to show a bit more skin, I tend to feel better about myself, and the question of whether I would impress men or not is pretty down the list of reasons why. Another benefit of, let's say, dressing nicely is that it is argued that by doing so, you are in control and empowered, as if you are choosing to wear something more sexy, then you are in charge of your sexual energy, rather than it be something for others to decide. This culture contrasts to that of the past, where there was more pressure for women to conform to modesty. Therefore, women choosing to wear more revealing clothing could feel as though they are able to dictate to themselves how they are viewed by others. Again, this makes sense in the culture of clubs as an example, and surely it can only be a positive if women have a louder voice concerning their own sexuality and their sexual desires. Yet this shift in culture is not something that we can only view as a positive, and instead we need to look into the deeper reasons behind why women who choose to wear revealing clothing may end up feeling more empowered in the first place. There may be some listeners who have agreed with this line of argument so far and may be feeling confused as to why there would be any kind of problem involved in this mix. However, there may be some people listening to this who are already shaking their heads. Nonetheless, before I move on to some of the points that may raise some questions, I just want to say that regardless of your personal opinion, whatever your gender, you should not shame women who choose to wear more revealing clothing. This is because if anyone receives a negative comment on their appearance or choice of dress, it can destroy confidence. Also, if we choose to derail other women for wearing revealing clothes, it could advance rape culture, as it would be more likely to turn the conversation toward the choice of clothing that the woman was wearing at the time, as opposed to the fact that rape is inherently wrong. Anyways, let's get into this. There are certain ways that women can dominate men in certain work environments, such as those which pay for the women's appearance and their body. This includes within sex work, stripping, and modelling. Some may contest that surely this can only be a good thing, because after all, there is still a huge gender pay gap, including where men and women are doing exactly the same job. Therefore, why should any woman be concerned for the fact that there are a minority of industries where women come on top of men, even if it involves a woman's body rather than her brain? I'll briefly mention sex work here, where, as you can guess, the majority of sex workers are female, and it is true that a lot of money can be made in this industry. Some sex workers genuinely enjoy their work, finding it empowering and sexually liberating. Nonetheless, I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be sex work. I mean, there's reasons why I'm personally in favour of it, which I won't go into here. But hey, one day I might end up choosing to do a podcast on this. Anyways, it is important to realise that there is also a lot of sex workers who face poor conditions and poor pay. And the main reason that they are in this line of work is because they are underprivileged and are thus choosing this line of work because they believe it is the best way that they can make a living. This way, sex work for a lot of women is not something that is empowering, but it is a way that they can otherwise unwillingly use their bodies to make a living because they have scarce options. It is also argued that pornography encourages violence against women, which may not necessarily be true. Although taking a more moderate stance, it may hold true that some porn addicts may be more likely to view women as objects, especially those who are sex workers. Now let's touch upon the modelling industry, which is another of the very few occupations where women earn significantly more than men. It can be argued that it is financially empowering for female models, especially those at the top of the ladder, because they are receiving more pay than men for their occupation, which hugely focuses on their appearance. Nonetheless, when we consider that there are huge numbers of men who are making huge sums of money off the modelling industry, and that models bear the brunt of this in order to reflect what the current beauty standards are promoting, how empowering is the modelling industry really? Now this includes to the models themselves as well as to women in general. Plus, would it not be better if women could just earn as much as men in jobs which require any other kind of skill? As an example, Victoria's Secret model Lima stated she'd have no solid food 9 days before the show kicked off, and no liquid 12 hours before. Meanwhile, the modelling industry is worth trillions of pounds and has always favoured very young and very thin women who look very childlike in appearance. And we have all seen what the Victoria's Secret models look like. I'm sure that Katie, who is at university, who enjoys quite a few beers followed by a takeaway on a night out, yet basically living her life, is unlikely to be as naturally as thin as any of the Victoria's Secret models. And I'm certain that 30-year-old Claire, who works a drowsy office job, who enjoys a glass of wine with her pasta on many occasions, would not naturally look as skinny as those models. Yeah, getting the models to excessively exercise throughout the year, I suppose, then pressuring them to basically go into starvation and dehydration before the show is an insult to the models and is an insult to women in general, as it is a process to achieve a look that is both very unnatural and very unhealthy. Therefore, how could an industry that forces women to go to such unhealthy extremes be empowering? Meanwhile, 50-year-old Paul, who rocks up to the office late, who clearly has no idea what he is really doing, and lies every 10 seconds, earns a substantial salary, even though he is rather overweight and his hair is more than just a bit of a mess. Okay, to be fair, I did make Paul up, but I suppose you could just put our current Prime Minister in place of Paul if you want a realistic example. So yeah, earning a huge salary is usually a hell of a lot easier for men than it is for women. But this is all about to get worse. As you are probably already aware, models can be scouted as children. An example would be from Stella Duvel, who complains that when she was 14 she was called pudgy and was forced to go on a 700 calorie a day diet, bearing in mind that a toddler needs about 1200 a day. It is also commonplace for girls to model lingerie as young as 14. This is inevitably going to be a really traumatic experience for the young model, which could lead to very poor body image, over-sexualization of themselves, and potentially eating disorders. 14-year-old girls simply should not have to worry about their weight, and they certainly should not be encouraged to consider themselves sexually. Yet these practices can not only lead to young models feeling this way, but it can also lead to other girls being affected. Rather more imprisoning than empowering, I'd say. And as I'll go into later on, this can lead to girls growing up too fast, which can be incredibly damaging. But anyways, the prospect of bodies and appearance is most certainly not limited to the industries where workers are being paid for, well, their bodies and appearance. Nearly 1 in 10 women have been told by their bosses that they would prefer it if they were to wear high heels. This is simply a disgrace, yet I found this believable, considering that the workforce is not a level playing field between men and women, especially as far as the higher earning jobs are concerned. It is not surprising that women face pressure to dress slightly, often from their male seniors, be it directly or indirectly. This is also somewhat the case in the hospitality industry, which is not too surprising considering that drunk men are more likely to tip waitresses who they find attractive. Now, it could be said that wanting to be more sexually appealing to receive more tips is sexist in itself, but at the same time, I certainly don't blame the people who would choose to do this, and quite frankly, if I was in that position, I'd probably do exactly the same. However, it's unfair that female workers can get forced to dress a way in which makes them feel uncomfortable. When this is an example would be when there was an investigation of some of Canada's top restaurant chains by CBC, which found that there are several female staff who felt pressured to wear revealing clothing, with one claiming that she was told not to wear underwear underneath this dress because she complained that her underwear was visible through it. Now, yet all of this may suggest that women who choose to put into effort at work for a confidence boost may not actually be doing it for that reason, but rather it is as a result of a pressure that they undergo anyhow, because of the evidence that suggests otherwise. Therefore, perhaps we all need to have a deeper think behind why we're choosing to dress a certain way. Yet again, whatever women may choose to do, we cannot win. As an example, women are also frequently told to cover up in the workplace because otherwise their outfit, which they may be wearing purely out of comfort, would be seen as a distraction to men. This is even the case at school, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I went to an all-girls school and I was told that, well, not myself, but everyone was told not to wear short shorts, not to wear tank tops, etc. on a school trip. Even if it was in really hot weather, and it was involving a lot of exercise. I mean, I personally don't understand what's so distracting about like a 12-year-old girl wearing a tank top while on a scavenger hunt, especially considering it's an all-girls school. But this just demonstrates like just how ridiculous everything is. Now let's talk about tits. Yay, because everyone loves them. From the 70-year-old pervy Peter, who lives like around the corner, to 16-year-old angry feminist Sandra, who will talk about tits as though they're a source of actual feminine energy. We love to flaunt them as well. But I think that some people have gotten so crazy about tits that it has actually become rather harmful. In comparison to men's breasts, women's breasts are ridiculously sexualised, and it is not surprising considering that pictures of tits are basically seen everywhere, whether it's in magazines, on billboards, online. You just can't get away from them. Nonetheless, in the past, boobs weren't as sexualised compared to the bum, legs, ankles and even feet, which, yeah, feet, in my opinion, is a bit gross, but it does seem a bit weird. Yet the original purpose of breasts has been for breastfeeding, but the over-sexualisation of breasts has led to this activity being a bit of a taboo. Whilst it is legal to breastfeed in the UK, it is also true that a lot of women simply do not feel comfortable actually breastfeeding in public, even though, like I said, this is legal. For instance, many women are too afraid to breastfeed, like on a public bus for instance, or they'll try and do so discreetly, which I would imagine is pretty much impossible. In comparison, like in other countries, or some other countries, women freely breastfeed and like no one will turn their heads unless if they happen to be from the UK. Or I'm sure like there's other countries as well. It's gonna be, obviously, but it just shows that, you know, the extent to which boobs have become sexualised is just too much. But is it really correct though that parts of women's bodies have become so sexualised to the point that women feel uncomfortable using them for their biological purpose? Let it sink in for a minute that the beauty industry is worth over $128 billion. Now there's a lot more to the history behind beauty standards, but throughout history they have been defined by European and Western cultures, being the countries that hold the most power, thus making it kind of about race. This way, European features have been defined as being more attractive compared to other features. Moreover, throughout history, there's been the notion that we have to work in order to transform our appearance, be it by dieting, applying vast amounts of makeup, or now with a trend of like frequently attending the gym in order to achieve a slim, toned but healthy body. This way, beauty clearly ties well into capitalism. Therefore, while we may feel empowered by applying another coat of mascara, or feel empowered when we finally have those legs from going to the gym all the time, or when we applaud ourselves after losing a certain amount of weight, it is important to be aware of the causation behind why this is the case. Nonetheless, there is another aspect to the history of beauty standards which I hadn't actually thought about before. Here, the Washington Post argues that the link between fashion and politics defines beauty standards. For instance, the post-war optimism of the 1950s produced Davis Day and Debbie Reynolds sweet enough to be edible, and in the 1960s there was more concern with social protests and idealism than with feminine atmosphere. Nowadays, it's argued that ethnic looks and older women are more kind of accepted into the remit of beauty standards because they hold more power in society compared to in the past. Moreover, I think as well that these days a lot of the beauty standard is more sort of focused on health, which is why different wellness companies, different skincare companies have like released so many different skincare products, and you get some influencers being like, oh, here's my like 12-part skincare routine a day. This is where I go to the gym. These are all my protein shakes, blah, blah, blah. Although realistically, I don't think that having like a massive skincare routine and going to the gym necessarily makes you healthy, or at least not having that doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. But of course, at the end of the day, it's all about making money. Again, I think that it's possible that this may change at least somewhat in the next few years, as like the early 2000s are coming back, and I might make a podcast on this again, but like basically very, very thin bodies were seen as like the ideal back then, which is concerning. Like, I mean, I imagine you've all heard of like Kate Moss now, like advertising Diet Coke, which is concerning. Like, it's Diet Coke has already been like associated with like eating disorders and stuff, because obviously if someone has an eating disorder, they're more likely to have like Diet Coke than normal Coke, because it like barely has any calories in it. And now Kate Moss, being like a notoriously skinny, like extremely famous model of like the early 2000s, I think she was popular in the early 2000s, I might be wrong, just means shit basically, in my opinion anyways. But basically, again, like, although older women, different ethnic looks, there's, you know, the body positivity movement and all that, which looks great for the beauty industry now, we still have a long way to go. It's still heavily focused upon like being toned or like getting to a certain ideal or whatever. So really, like, beauty standards may be slowly moving forward, possibly, but I still think that there's a very long way to go, or perhaps we'll just never reach it because of capitalism and adverts. Sad. Anyway, one of the issues with women choosing to wear more revealing clothing is that it can lead to her being judged negatively by her female peers. This was shown in a study where female participants judged a woman more negatively when she was pictured in revealing clothing compared to when she was wearing non-revealing clothing, where the women believed that the one in revealing clothing would have been more likely to have one-night stands. The hypothesis put forward for the study was that female competition for mates leads women to collectively criticise women who they deem sexually permissible. This was partly inspired by sexual economics theory, which maintains that sexual interactions can be compared to a marketplace. Here, men are the buyers who are looking to acquire sex, and women are the suppliers who provide it. And so that women maintain their bargaining power, they may coordinate to condemn other women who lower the costs of sex through promiscuity. Therefore, whilst women may choose to wear their own sexuality by having the freedom to choose how they dress, really it still holds true that those giving the women attention are the ones who hold the power over the women. This may seem like a rather outdated stance, but from, well, my own like personal experience, I can say that sadly, I think it still holds true. An example would just be like in clubs where men are more than happy to go up to any woman and be like, yo, hi, where are you from? And then like, before you know it, his arm is like literally around you, and it's like, shit, how the fuck do I escape this? What have I even put myself into? Whereas like women going up to men in clubs, it's just deemed like, I don't know, it just doesn't happen anywhere near as much. And it's like, surely men and women should have like an equal choice on like who they approach, because like, you know, women are just as likely to find like a guy attractive as a guy as a girl, so it all seems a bit weird. For a start, it is true that clothing such as high heels, makeup sets and skimpy clothing is directly marketed to very young girls. This has led to children being more unhappy with their appearance compared to their confidence, school life and family life, as shown by a survey by charity The Children's Society. As a rather gross example, the clothing store Abercrombie Kids, I think you pronounce it, marketed a push-up bikini top for young girls. Now, to me, this is simply disgusting, and I honestly cannot see any logical reason behind why any child would need a push-up bikini. I mean, there's nothing to fucking push up. Anyways, this has led to negative implications, leading young girls to grow up too fast. This was shown by a survey by the Girl Guides, which showed that 46% of girls aged 11 to 16 would consider cosmetic surgery, and that girls started to dislike their bodies from as young as 10 or 11. This is because young girls are facing increasing pressure from markets to grow up faster, with them having more and more access to technology at an earlier and earlier age. This, of course, can lead to lower self-esteem, mental health problems, and young girls missing out on, well, being young girls. However, while this can potentially negatively impact all young girls, it can certainly negatively impact young girls who are already vulnerable. For instance, there is a correlation between absent/low quality fathering and risky adolescent sexual behaviour, which is stronger with girls than boys. Yet these existing societal pressures make it even more likely for vulnerable young girls to engage in risky behaviour. Already, teenagers who grow up without a secure attachment style are more likely to grow up too fast for varying reasons. But with this pressure, it means that girls are even more likely to do so in different risky ways. This could lead to girls who have already faced trauma just going through more. Okay, so you've come this far through my podcast, and you may completely disagree with me, but you may also agree with me. But whatever stance you take on this, I would say that it is mostly important to listen to the following, because if you disagree with me, I don't want you thinking that I'm knocking other women who choose to wear more revealing clothing. For a start, this would make me a complete hypocrite, because I sometimes wear more revealing clothing, as well as put makeup on, to make me feel better about my appearance, and thus make me feel more confident in myself. I mean, look at me, I feel like I look like shit. I shouldn't really say this when I'm trying to, like, raise, like, an important feminist issue, but, like, I've got makeup on anyway. My hair's bright pink, although that's, like, something else, and I'm not exactly wearing a thick jumper, but again, like, I feel good about myself, kind of, because of, like, how I'm choosing to dress at the moment. But again, it's bloody hot outside, and, like, I swear it's even hotter in my room. Well, in the room that I'm in, I don't even know anymore. But yeah, like, you don't need to know this, but, like, the window kind of attracts the sun in, which would be lovely, like, in spring or in autumn. But, like, in the summer, it's just like, well, in this weather, it's just like, oh no. And yeah, I do love this weather. I'm not being one of these grumpy people who's like, oh my god, it's too hot. But like, it's concerning. Like, we all know that by now. And also, like, if you're not going to the beach, then, or the park, and you have to work, or, well, for this morning, sit in my room making YouTube videos apparently, then what's the point? I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure you're really interested in the weather when I was filming this. Anyway, where even was I? Okay, although we may agree that this in itself is inherently sexist, at the end of the day, if it makes someone feel more confident, then although in my view it is not ideal, I would not disregard women who make these choices, regardless to the extent of which they do so. Further, I accept that there are some situations and some occupations that call for us to wear particularly revealing clothing. And while sometimes this may be somewhat sexist, I would say as sometimes it isn't. At least it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's boiling hot. Like, who's gonna wear like a fucking jumper? Anyway, for instance, sex workers are very likely to be in revealing clothing, which kind of comes with, like, their job. It's also completely unnecessary how some clothes have just become completely sexualized because of the thought that, oh, well, women who are, like, I don't know, 21 are gonna wear, like, revealing clothes to show off all their tits. And it's gotten to, like, oh, 11-year-olds shouldn't wear tank tops, or 11-year-olds shouldn't wear, like, short shorts. It's ridiculous. Like, they're wearing them out of comfort. Like, it's just, why the fuck is that even sexualized? It really shouldn't be a thing. Whereas, if you do agree with me, it is unfair to blame women who do make these choices. After all, the false importance of appearance is something which has been ingrained into us to such a crazy extent. Therefore, it is no wonder that we tend to get a confidence boost from flaunting our bodies, wearing nice clothing and wearing makeup. Oh, and one more thing, perhaps after all, if there are increasing numbers of women who choose to wear revealing clothing and wear clothing because they want to own their bodies, then it may reflect a movement within feminism which may, at the end of the day, be necessary for a certain amount of time. And although it is very important for us to be aware of the realities of why we're doing something, this is not something that can be unlearned and debunked overnight. Instead, it should be a work in progress. Okay, so this is the end of today's podcast. I feel that it is fair to say this podcast has been a bit longer than the other ones that I've posted because, well, firstly, there was, like, quite a lot to say that was relevant, and also because I ended up going off on quite a few personal tangents, which I'm sure you're really interested in. Anyways, I apologise as well if my stance, like, wasn't too clear on this whole thing, but I feel there are just so many conflicting issues concerning this. Please feel free to comment, like, your own opinions. Comment what you think about this video as well. Like, okay, don't comment on my wallpaper, but just like comment on, like, you know, if you think it was shit, say it was shit, try and be a bit nicer. But yeah, thank you. I'd like any sort of feedback. Anyways, hope you all have a good rest of the day.